I ran all the Star Wars films and shows through a wheel to see what I was going to watch on Star Wars Day. And I landed on Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, and I was super disappointed. However, I thought it would be a good chance to rewatch this and get a really good look of this film as a film, and of course as a Star Wars film. When I went to go see this the first time at theaters, I was ready to see how bad it was going to be, considering the previous films leading up to the trailers. Saying that I didn't like The Last Jedi would be an understatement. Just as I had imagined, the film was lifeless, predictable, and boring. As a Star Wars film, it made no sense, was very predictable as I stated before, and anger-inducing. I had originally thought the film bashed Star Wars and did only bad for the franchise. Watching it again on Star Wars Day, I was semi-excited to rewatch it and see it with an open and understanding mind. And, well, this film is just as a lifeless, boring, and bashful film as when I first saw it. The characters, especially Rey, Finn, Poe, and surprisingly Kylo Ren, who I thought was the best character in the trilogy, were all so fake, and I thought I was watching an amateur's cut of the film. Unlike in The Force Awakens, I did not connect with the characters whatsoever. The only time I felt emotionally invested in this film was the 2 minutes that Han Solo was on screen, and when the Jedi were telling Rey to, quote-unquote, rise, which I suppose was the film's climax. While I did see the romantic relationships with Rey and Ben Solo, I never really felt it, unlike with the other relationships in Star Wars such as Han Solo and Leia Organa, and even Anakin Skywalker and Padme. This also applies with the buddy connection that Finn and Poe have. Yeah, it makes sense that they have this connecting, considering that they were the first couple of prominent good guys we ever see in this sequel trilogy, but the connection declined, not in the actual story, but in the filmmaking. For example, in The Force Awakens, these two had some serious comedy and bonding throughout the film. In The Rise of Skywalker, it feels extremely forced. Overall, the main characters in this film were unbearable to watch. Speaking of main characters, the fact that Palpatine is alive is just straight up a spit in the face of George Lucas, the character of Emperor Palpatine, and most of all, the entire character arc of Darth Vader. We had 6 films for Darth Vader's character arc. We had this introduction to the Force, the pressure of being the chosen one and the one to bring balance to the Force, his untimely and emotional change of character, his ruling above all the galaxy and proof that he is a strong wielder of the Force, his emotional connecting with his son and daughter and realizing what he's doing is wrong but not fully giving into it, and finally, his true purpose, to bring balance to the Force. Despite him failing to fulfill his destiny in the Revenge of the Sith, he did it by killing Palpatine at the end of Return of the Jedi, and finally restoring balance and moving back to the light side of the Force. But nope, that was all thrown out the window just because Rian Johnson and Disney made an oopsie. Palpatine coming back and dying in the end to someone who wasn't even properly trained, mind you, is pathetic and basically makes the prequels and the originals worthless. Take it over. Something I don't know how to feel about is the whole item force travel and the force remote fighting, or as I call it. On one hand, I'm screaming at the top of my lungs, that's not how the Force works. But on the other, I'm saying, well, if I'm judging a film based on how I think it works, but I didn't judge Darth Vader choking out one of the Death Star workers, that's not fair. I obviously don't know how the rules of the Force, but I gotta be honest, from what Disney has put out for us, besides some of their other titles, I don't think they know either. At first, I was totally against the whole item force traveling thing, but watching it again, I was kind of accepting of it. What I accepted is that I don't fully understand the rules of the Force, and there's a lot of things that can happen that I might think not work. One thing I do want to mention briefly is the ungodly amount of fan service. There is so much that there's too much to mention right here in this review. While I am a sucker for fan service and I enjoyed some of the ones in this movie, a lot of it felt me with either anger or disappointment. Angry because they obviously shoved insert time of fan service here to get a cheap pop off the crowd, and disappointed because it wasn't really used correctly. There is a way to deliver fan service correctly, however. For example, in the epic movie Avengers Endgame, the whole time travel stuff is complete fan service. But what's the difference between fan service in Avengers Endgame and fan service in The Rise of Skywalker? Arguably, Endgame did it right. Everything happened for a reason and served a purpose. It wasn't shoved in there just for a cheap pop. It wasn't used in the wrong way either. In this film, sadly, it is the exact opposite. But there were some good stuff to come out of this. I really liked all the colors used, the cinematography, and the CGI, although I think there was a little bit too much CGI for me. The little dude who wiped 3PO's memory was cute, but not as cute as Baby Yoda for sure. Of course, Han Solo showing up to Ben Solo in a memory was epic, and I loved it. As I mentioned before, all the Jedi telling Rey to rise was very cool, and I like how they added Ahsoka Tano to mix in the reference with the Clone Wars series, which is better than this freaking movie at least. I had a laugh at some of the comedy, but not all of it was funny. But some of those one-liners caught me off guard and it gave me a good chuckle.
Trust me.
Overall, I didn't like this as a Star Wars film or as a film in its own. But to put it into one sentence, it completely buries the films that come before it, just so it can stand tall, and still, it fails at that. It tries to be Endgame and be the big climactic ending that everyone was waiting for and everyone loves and everyone thinks it's a great wrap-up, but it severely falls short. When comparing it to the other Star Wars classics, it's a complete clusterfest of bad characters, bad writing, bad story, and a rushed decision making. It's obvious that Disney had no set path of where to go and what to do, especially considering how to do it. While Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker is, in my opinion, not the worst of the Star Wars films, it is most certainly the most disappointing.